joint insights from the CBN Fintech Survey of 2025 is to really show the architecture that regulates financial technology in Nigeria, and also the trends and highlights as spotlighted by that Fintech Survey report, to see how we can guide stakeholders in this space as to what to expect and how to prepare to be able to thrive in the financial technology space in Nigeria.
Nigeria's fintech ecosystem is now considered the largest in Africa. So what does it mean for the future of regulation and compliance generally?
Okay, so the reason first why it is considered Africa's fintech capital hub is because there is an increase in adoption of the digital system. So a lot of people are using their phones, their smartphones, their laptops. Lots of Nigerians are connected to the internet. So that's one reason. The second reason is that we have a somewhat supportive regulatory environment. So a lot of regulators are aware of the potential that exists in the fintech space in Nigeria. So they are bringing up a lot of policies, guidelines, reports to really checkmate and guide the innovation as it happens in that system. And then thirdly, we have a very vibrant startup ecosystem. So a lot of founders, having now seen the potential in the fintech space, are now developing products and services in that space. So that's why Nigeria is really regarded as Africa's fintech capital hub. Now, what this would mean for innovation and regulation and even compliance is that it's no longer seen as just a startup. It's now seen as an important part of the financial infrastructure. Because if one service provider, one fintech service provider, if any of their products or services or their platforms goes down, it can affect millions of individuals and businesses in Nigeria. So the regulators see that this is a space that, yes, it has potential, but now it also has, because it's a big part of the infrastructure, there are certain concerns that they have, things like fraud, cybersecurity, ensuring that the financial space is stable and protecting customers. So because of this, what we're going to then see is that the regulators are now going to be a bit more strict with their policies and all of their regulations, because they know that it's important in the financial infrastructure. It's not just, maybe 5 team members now having a platform or an app that they use. It's affecting millions and thousands of businesses and users. So we're going to see a lot more strict policies and regulation.
Okay, so you've talked about a number of regulators here. You've mentioned regulations a number of times, basically. So who are these regulators, and how easy it is to navigate, their database or whatever?
It's quite challenging for a lot of the players in the fintech space, and it's challenging for one particular reason that ties back to regulators, is that the regulators are very fragmented. We have a very fragmented regulatory landscape for these operators. So we have the most common one is the CBN, yes, and then we have the Securities and Exchange Commission. There's also, if the fintech is tied to telecommunications, they'll have to deal with NCC. They'll also have to consider the Nigerian Data Protection Commission, because they handle a lot of customer data. So these are some of the regulators that, at least the major ones that we can think about right now. And all of these regulators have their different guidelines and their different policies and their different standards that you have to meet up with. So it's quite challenging for these fintech operators to handle the work that is required of them. But what we are seeing, and what we even saw with the fintech reports that CBN put out, the first thing they noted is that 62.5% of those fintech operators note that the fragmentation of the system, of the space, makes it difficult for them to really scale and to really innovate. And so what the reports showed, that the CBN is proposing what we call a single regulatory window. So instead of these operators going to maybe the CBN office or meeting these agencies and then going to SEC and then going to the different regulators, you just have one window that they'll come and make all of the application. And what this is looking like it could offer these operators is there will be a reduction in approval timeline. So instead of spending maybe 6-7 months getting approval from different regulators, you can get it done in a month, right? Also, the legal and compliance cost is reduced. So instead of having 4 different operations where you try to get the approval, try to get the licenses, things like that, you just do it in one. So right now it's quite challenging. But what the future outlook looks like for these fintech operators is that if the single regulatory window plan is properly carried out, then regulation is going to be reduced, and that would be a burden that has been removed from these operators.
That's amazing. That's really good, actually. So I look forward to a system where, fintech operators would have it easy trying to navigate the whole space.
Yes, and especially because that's what a lot of policy makers have been really pushing for, that we have such a system as this. So that's what the CBN report is proposing, and we're really trusting that it will be implemented properly.
These regulators you've mentioned, there are licenses that the fintech operators are going to, have to get from them. So what are there like any delays, in compliance, in things like that?
Yes, and it's one of the concerns that was showed in the fintech survey report that CBN released. 62.5% of the surveyed firms explained that licensing delays really affect their ability to innovate. And what that essentially means is that because they know that approval will take too long for them to either get the license or to meet up with certain guidelines, it's difficult for them to put out their products and their features or improvements on their products and features on their platforms out to the market, because first they'll need to get approval. And because the system is still developing, some of those features that they've thought about, there's no framework for it. It doesn't even exist in our laws, right? So it's really delaying their ability to scale. And that's such a serious issue because the fintech space is a very innovative space. Things move very fast. So 1 minute we're thinking about being able to pay with cards. The next minute we're talking about wireless transfers. The next minute we're talking about maybe paying with your fingerprint, or just maybe now there's even AI and things like that. So it's moving really, really fast, and what we have currently makes it difficult for them to innovate. So what this would look like for a lot of the market operators is that they will need to work hand in hand with the regulators to ensure that as they're innovating, they are moving the regulators with them. Similarly with the regulators as well, as they're trying to ensure that the market is stable, that consumers are protected, that they reduce risks of fraud and cybersecurity risks, things like that. As they're setting up all of these compliances and all of these guidelines and all of these policies and all of this framework, they must ensure that they don't stifle innovation. They must give room for a lot of these fintech operators to really grow. So yes, it is affecting the market space, but we're seeing that when both parties, the regulators and then the operators work hand, growth can be structured and still be as quickly as we need it to.
Okay, so I now understand that, for this space to really work, both parties, that is the government or the policymakers, and then the operators in the fintech space, who need to work together to see how they can, make things easier.
Yeah, and for it to grow, yes.
So there's been increasing conversations around collaborations between the regulators and the fintech operators. So what are the policies that that have been put out there to really just navigate the entire space?
So lots of the things we're seeing the regulators, particularly the CBN, do to really help the fintech space is policies around open banking, digital infrastructure. We know the introduction of the NIBSS, that's the Nigerian Interbank Settlement System, that really makes it possible for people to quickly send money and receive money across banks. So you send money to Access Bank and you're sending from Zenith, the person who is receiving Access Bank can quickly get it. That's an innovation that existed because of the NIBSS, right? Well, 10, 15 years ago. And this was really a leading conversation in the African fintech space, because a lot of countries were not doing that, but because Nigeria did it, we now see that growth has existed. So what this is now looking like in the coming years is hinging on building on that digital infrastructure. And even with the advent of AI, the policies that the CBN is proposing is that a lot of these operators, they're encouraging them to use artificial intelligence to reduce cybersecurity risks and even to catch fraudulent transactions, things like that. It's also helping these operators to meet up with their KYC and anti-money laundering compliance requirements. We're also looking at there's conversation around open banking. So what that would essentially mean is the way we have BVN now, right? That one person has one BVN number. It would then be possible to be able to track your activities across different banks. So if say you borrow money from OPay, for instance, or PalmPay, there's no system currently that allows both parties to know that you are a defaulter in OPay and PalmPay. I don't know if you get what I mean. Yes. So now, but with open banking, they can work together. So OPay can have access to PalmPay's back end to see the data, to see the customer. So those are the type of policies that the CBN is really developing, just to make things more transparent, to keep the financial sector a bit more stable and to allow for better customer offerings. What they're also doing is they're encouraging cross-border transactions, and a lot of the operators have even said in the reports that they're looking to build not just for Nigeria now, they're looking to build for Africa. So it's going to be very possible in the next maybe 5, 10, even 3 years that you can send money to your cousin in Ghana through your Access Bank, through your Zenith Bank, through your First Bank. The way we can send dollar, you can now, it's also going to be possible that you can now send naira and then they convert it to the African equivalent. So those are some of the things that we're seeing. The policies really and the reform that the regulators are bringing are really tied into 3 key things. The first is inclusion, so to ensure that the unbanked are banked. Another one is in integrity, because fintech is now an important part of the digital infrastructure, the financial infrastructure system. They want to ensure that there are frameworks to guide their operations. And so the third is innovation, to ensure that as these operators are growing in the space, you are giving them the room to do so, and you're not allowing those regulations to stifle innovation. So those are the 3 guidelines to all the policies that the CBN and even all the regulators are really developing in the financial space.
Okay, so really amazing, policies and innovations coming up. I think I'm more interested about the open banking. Hopefully by then I won't have to borrow from OPay
and then have to now
exactly.
go from PalmPay. I think it's really interesting because I think not just in the financial space, but generally, Nigerians' ecosystem is very fragmented. There's not a lot of data sharing going on among operators.
So as the fintech, ecosystem becomes more complex, of course, with the advent of more innovations, more regulations, policies, and all of that, how can legal advisors help their clients, to stay compliant with these policies and innovations?
So the first thing is to even know what the changes are, what's happening in the space currently, and what the future outlook is like. And really, that's what we even do at the firm. Just always stay abreast with any new regulation, any new guideline, any policy that comes from all of the regulators. So the first thing that legal advisors need to do is just be informed, stay updated with what's happening. And then secondly is to guide appropriately, to understand the needs of the clients, the person, the operator that you're speaking with, understand what their objective is right now in the next 5, 10 years, where they're heading towards, and then guide them properly. This is what has been in the past, this is what is currently happening in the landscape, and this is what the future outlook looks like. I spoke about some of the reforms that the CBN and other regulators are moving towards: open banking, building digital infrastructure, cross-border payment, things like that. So if you're advising clients, you want to speak with that in mind. And now with new technology like artificial intelligence, you also want to speak with that in mind. How does artificial intelligence even affect the fintech space? The conversation around data sharing, for instance, how does that impact the fintech space? Because the Nigerian Data Protection Commission is very active, ensuring that big organizations, especially like fintech organizations, for instance, fintech companies now, because they handle a lot of customer data, there is now that heightened compliance guideline for them in terms of how they manage customer data. So as a legal advisor, you need to be abreast with what those guidelines are, so that you can provide proper counsel to the operators that you will be advising or have the opportunity to speak with.
Now we've seen, and understand what fintech regulation in Nigeria right now is. We've seen the policies, the innovations, and all of that. So do you want to give us a brief summary generally?
What I would say is the fintech space has a lot of opportunities. The potential is is massive. The scale is also undeniable as well, because in 2024, the fintech space did about 11 billion transactions. This is double what they did in 2022. We're now in 2026, so I think that number has even tripled, if not more. In conclusion, I would say if you are an operator in the space, or even someone who's looking to enter into the space, it's important for you to get adequate legal counsel to guide you, because it's not a space you just enter. So for the regulator, the work that they've done is impressive. We see the Nigeria regulatory system as very supportive of the work that the fintech operators are doing, and I would encourage that they continue in that spirit of collaborativeness, because it will allow for innovation to really grow and scale. We even see it in the recent sandbox supervisory pilot program that they had, where they brought about 6 to 7 fintech operators to really test what virtual asset providing framework would look like. So we have that already in the works. So kudos to the operators. We're really hoping a lot of the policies, a lot of the future outlook that they've proposed, they would handle it effectively, because the system, the ecosystem really needs that. So really that's about it when we talk about regulation of financial technology in Nigeria, especially drawing insights from the fintech survey reports as provided by the CBN, the Central Bank of Nigeria. It's really a great space. So for people who are looking to enter into that space, to really tap into the potential that exists in that space, receive or get proper legal counsel so that you can thrive in that space.
Okay, so I think you've done an amazing work, Chimamanda. Of course, that article, I read it myself. It was really in-depth, and now you've given us a summary of what that particular article is about. So I would urge our viewers and audience to go take a look at that article. It's on our website and our social media pages, so you can take your time, get comfortable, and then take a look at the article. Then if you have any questions, you can always, send same to any of our social media pages or on our website, and we'll be very ready to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is Transadvisory Legal, and you can follow us on our social media platforms on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, now X, and YouTube.